Okay, so on today's podcast, we have Eoin, who owns Discover SUP. Discover SUP is an internationally accredited Academy of Surfing Instructors SUP school. Eoin is at the helm of that. He is a waterman with extensive experience in sailing, kite surfing, kayaking, and swimming. Eoin discovered SUP in 2016, and since that time, he's been helping and encouraging others to discover the wonder of the big blue through SUP activity, and always promoting safety as a priority. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about today. So I've just got a little quote I want to share with you here. This is from Eoin himself. So when I discovered SUP, I immediately knew I'd found a sport I'd grow to love. SUP allows me to exercise, energize, and relax my body and mind. Sharing my passion for the sport is where I'm at my happiest. I believe that everybody has the ability to enjoy SUP through any one of its many forms. I love that, mate. I'm absolutely on board with that quote. I think you've just summarized the secret of why we all love paddleboarding. So welcome. That's the introduction. So I'd just like to kick off with just expanding a little bit on your background, please, Eoin. So kind of what got you into paddleboarding and where you went from there.
Sure. So thank you very much, first of all, for having me on today. It's great. My background in water, I've been on the water or in the water since I was knee-high to a grasshopper. You know, six months old, and I was in the water. And there's pictures of me standing on the bow of a boat, harnessed in at probably no more than 1 or 2 years of age, on my grandfather's boat, sailing around. Actually, coincidentally enough, very close to where I live nowadays. I've done a tour of the country in the meantime, but I've come back to what I consider home now, and that's where I teach SUP nowadays. So it's kind of been a nice kind of circle of life, if you want to call it that. But in between that time period, I've done so many different things to do with water. I was a competitive swimmer for years, and that involved all the heavy duty training of, you know, in the pool 8 or 9 times a week, and you know, eating, sleeping, swimming, eating, sleeping, swimming. You know, that's all it was, and that was great for a time in my life. But then I became to realize that there was other things outside of that. So that was where then sailing in a more casual sense, dinghy sailing, you know, cruiser sailing, that kind of stuff came in. And then I discovered kite surfing, and kite surfing is now one of my major passions, but very much in a recreational sense. I don't have any commercial drive when it comes to kite surfing. That's mine, and I keep it to myself. I don't want to give it away to anyone else, except those that I kite surf with. But in between, I've done a little bit of kayaking. Not a huge amount. It wouldn't be something that would absolutely grab me, but I enjoy it again because it's on the water. And then I discovered SUP in 2016. I just saw these two people, because I'm very, very lucky to back onto a beach where I live. So nearly my garden is sand, if you want to look at it like that. And so when I look out my back window, yeah, I'm so lucky. And when I look out my back window, I can see all the action on the beach. And I just saw these people down there one day, and they were standing on these boards, paddling away. And I said, that looks a bit interesting. I wonder what that is. And I always remember buying my first secondhand board. I traveled across the country on a whim, and I just bought this board, not knowing what was I buying. Was it any good? Was it not good? Oh God, you know, but I just wanted to give it a shot. And I bought it, and I came home. I didn't tell my partner I was doing it at the time. I just came home and said, look at the car there, look what I've got. And lo and behold, we started our paddleboarding journey, both of us, because she paddles alongside me. And yeah, so that's kind of what brought me to SUP. Through a myriad of other water sports activities, I ended up standing on a board.
Brilliant, love it. And so what got you into eventually teaching it, becoming an ASI school? What led to that?
So as soon as I discovered SUP, I'm one to always understand exactly how it works, why it works, the technicality of it, you know, those kind of things. And so I very quickly started to watch many YouTube videos, and at the time there wasn't many there, but you know, you kind of do your little bit of research and see what you can find. Because I didn't even know of SUP schools at the time. I didn't know that they even existed. And through my background in water safety, I was a water safety instructor for many years. I worked as a pool lifeguard, a beach lifeguard, And I've also worked in other guises as a safety officer on festivals and things like that. So I've always had safety inbuilt into me. And so anytime I was talking to people about SUP and about, what was this thing that I was doing on the beach that no one else had ever seen before, I would be kind of trying to tell them, this is how you would do it safely. And it just came naturally to me. So as time went on, I would continue that message, and sometimes I feared that I was being seen as no fun safety, but I kind of just bit my tongue when it came to that, because it's so important to me, and that developed into a WhatsApp thread that I created in 2018, back before WhatsApp was probably as popular as it is now, and that started to connect a SUP community together. But then very quickly I kind of realized I want to make this kind of serious. I want to make sure I have the backup behind me, so that any information that I'm giving out, I can give out and say, it's credible, because I'm an accredited school. I'm a qualified instructor. I'm not just someone standing on the beach, giving you airy-fairy information. But so that's kind of where it came from. I decided I wanted to put a bit of meat around the bones as such. And I knew of Paul Byrne at the time, who was one of the few suppers in Ireland probably that was known at the time. So I approached him and we had a chat, and he said, well, look, why don't you become a school? So I did, and went down that road of getting audited, doing all the paperwork, which I kind of enjoyed, because it's kind of in my nature to do all that anyway. And it also, as well as enjoying it, it taught me a lot. It made me think a lot about what was I doing. I was taking people out on the water, and now I know that I can do that absolutely 100% confidently, because I have all the backup I need. I've all my documentation done. I've researched everything that I'm doing, so I know that it's right. So that's kind of where I came to developing Discover SUP and becoming a school.
Fantastic. And a busy season so far, or has it gone?
It has, as I'd say in the UK, probably similar. We've had a June that was kind of difficult. There was a lot of days where you would think you were going to be supping, and then all of a sudden you get a last minute change the night before, with a bit of a change in the forecast. So where last year, 2021, was the year of no wind, this year tends to be a little bit different. So it's been a good season, but a little bit a difficult one at times.
One of the things you mentioned there, Eoin, was SUP safety. That's obviously something that you're very passionate about. So at the moment, there seems to be a lot of incidents appearing within the press. There was one recently about 16 paddleboarders that had to be brought back in. So let's talk a little bit about that. Why is safety so important within this sport?
It's so important within SUP, and then also so important within water sports in general, because as much as that big blue looks lovely and inviting and amazing to get into on a hot summer's day, it is an extreme environment. We're not designed to live in the water. We're not designed to be in the water. So as soon as we start to approach it, and as soon as we start to put ourselves into that environment, we need to be making sure that we are doing everything we can to allow ourselves to get back out of it again. And if we're not, then two things are happening. We're putting ourselves at risk, but we're also possibly putting others at risk. We cannot, one of the things I say to a lot of people is, when I'm teaching, say, for example, self-rescue, I would teach self-rescue on the basis of, I'm teaching you this, or I'm coaching you in these skills, because I want you to know that when you go on the water, you're not going to have to ask anyone else to give you help to get back off the water. You're going to be able to do it under your own steam. Now, God forbid, if something does happen and someone comes to your aid, you're not going to say no to them, but you don't want to put anyone else under that pressure. You don't want to give anyone else that responsibility. I'm a firm believer that if we're putting ourselves into that environment, we need to be able to get ourselves back out again. And so that's where, for me, that's when I teach all of my safety skills, that's where that's coming from. Is this idea that we're being responsible paddlers. Every time we hit the water, we're being ambassadors for the sport. In the eyes of people who maybe have never engaged in education, have never engaged with the school, have just gone down to the local shop and bought a board and gone out, maybe half inflated it, not wearing a PFD, in Ireland, not wearing a PFD, maybe forgetting to put their fin in, all those different things. when we're out on the water, be it as a school or someone who's engaged in education or someone who's even just done a bit of research online, you're being an ambassador for the sport. And you want to make sure that you're showing best practice at the end of the day.
Yeah, 100%. And I think one of the things as well, I don't know if you noticed, but maybe 10 years ago, a lot of people getting into the sport, but like you and like me, we already had a background in the water sports. We knew about offshore winds and tides and flow, and we had a basic understanding, whereas a lot of the people now don't seem to have that. I'm finding more and more, like you're saying, there's people who wouldn't understand what a fin would do, or the board needs to be fully inflated, or you know, it's a lovely sunny day, it's a bit windy, but it doesn't matter, you know, I'll be fine. So I don't know, do you think the landscape has changed more recently with more inexperienced people trying to get out on the water? Probably tied in with as well the influx of budget brand boards that have really hit the market. You know, it's become a bit cheaper. You know, 10 years ago, you'd be buying probably a Red or something like that, best part of £800, very high quality board. But, you know, now you can pick one up for sort of 150 quid if you really look. And I don't know, I mean, I kind of get the impression that now we're starting to see a new generation of people out on the water who have no experience and don't know what they're doing. And do you feel the same?
I would. I suppose the thing I'd be careful of is I wouldn't dismiss those people, and I wouldn't tell them, you know, necessarily that they are being stupid or that they're being, you know, silly or anything like that. They are just out to have a good time. They're out to enjoy themselves, and they're out, you know, using a board that was accessible to them, maybe because of price, and which is a fantastic thing, because it's introducing new people to the sport that maybe weren't ever able to get involved, either because of the price of a hardboard or the transport and storage of a hardboard, or, as you say, back a few years ago, the price point of inflatables at the time, which were, you know, much higher than they are now. I can think of a board just up the road from me in a shop that is costing about €175 that I could go up and buy today, and I could go out on the water. Now, I don't know, when that board is sold, is that person saying, look, consider getting some education. Have you got a PFD? If not, I have one there for you that we can, you know, we can sell you with the board. Do you understand how the board works? For all I know, that board is just walking out the door with that person with absolutely no instruction. Now, that's where there's this little, I suppose, unfortunate area of, is it up to the retailer to deliver that information? Is it up to the retailer, you know, as part of a duty of care or a duty of responsibility on the basis that they're selling this equipment, to promote that information as well? And that's a discussion maybe that needs to be had. But for people who are going out on the water on those, you know, more accessible boards, and, you know, that tends to be the phrase I use rather than budget boards, because I think budget boards tends to dismiss it a little bit. You know, that's where us as ambassadors on the water shouldn't feel any, we should feel encouraged and confident and empowered to go up and engage with those people. And, you know, if we see them not wearing a PFD, or if we see that their board isn't inflated properly, not going up all know-it-all and all, you know, I know everything and I'm brilliant, but, you know, just, guys, look, it's great to see you out there having some fun on the water. Do you know what? You'd actually have more fun if your board was inflated a bit more, you know? Or, I see you don't have a fin in. That's actually why the board is going a little bit like the bumper cars in the fun fair, you know? So it's delivering the message that way, rather than, you know, I know this and I know best and listen to me and no one else, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And I really like the point you've made that we shouldn't dismiss that, the you know, people that are buying, and I like the term accessible boards as well, because it is an inroad into the market, well, not into the market, into the sport. And, you know, a lot of people will go in at that kind of entry level, they'll try the equipment, and then they'll most likely outgrow, if they really get into sport, they'll outgrow it, especially if they turn to a different discipline. So yeah, definitely, we shouldn't be dismissing those people. We should be engaging with those people, helping to educate them in a I say, in a non elitist kind of way, really. If you, well, I'm a SUP instructor, I can tell you what's what. And you do, you know, you get little times on the beach and things. You might just go, oh, if you just flip your paddle around the other way, it's going to work a little better. And then, oh, thanks for that, mate. And off they go. So yeah, I think that's really a good way. And I'm hoping to see, as we keep growing as a sport, that we keep acknowledging that. I mean, there is a lot around safety at the moment. A lot of people are making moves around that. You know, ourselves, we're trying to launch SUP standards to get, you know, sets of standards out there that are accessible for everybody, and other organisations are probably doing similar things. So, I mean, where do you, what I suppose it's quite a big question, but where do you think the best input will be to implement safety within the sport? Is that, would that be through sort of social media, or is it just kind of, I don't know, I think it's quite a difficult question to answer, but just interested to hear what your view might be on that.
It is a difficult one to answer, because you have so many, I suppose you've so many different personalities out there. You know, I did see, you know, I saw a comment on Facebook the other day. Someone was asking about SUP lessons. You know, where would you go for SUP lessons in the local area? And one of the comments on it was, oh, just go out with someone experienced. They'll show you everything and tell you it all. You don't need to pay for it. But if you do want to pay for it, well, then here's where you go. So all of a sudden saying it's kind of nearly dismissing what we're doing as schools, you know, which is difficult to counteract, particularly when there's money involved. And the way things are at the moment with disposable income, you know, we're kind of looking at it going, well, is SUP all of a sudden becoming a luxury? Or is SUP education becoming a luxury, you know? So that's something I think we need to work on, is having certainly ASI instructors who are active on social media, promoting that safety message on an ongoing basis. So if you decide to go down the ASI route as an instructor, well, then you are committing to promoting, you know, best practice safety in all opportunities that you see. Will be one thing I would say. I think the other thing is the retailers, and looking at how we can work better with the retailers or encourage them to help us. You know, I think we have support from some of the smaller retailers, you know, the ones that maybe aren't the big brand stores, you know, those that are maybe only operating online, or you know, are operating from, you know, their shed in their back garden, or whatever it might be in terms of importing and selling. The bigger brands, you know, I'm not sure we have the full support of them yet in terms of promoting safety as much as they could. You know, I think they're doing it, but in a tokenism type way, rather than really delivering a safe message. And also then I think, coming from the manufacturers as well, in terms of the marketing collateral that they send out. You know, we have a big problem here in Ireland because it is a legal requirement to wear a PFD. It's as simple as that. But yet, if you look at the marketing collateral that comes from any of the manufacturers, most of it doesn't feature suppers wearing a PFD. So, you know, what do the retailers in Ireland use then as their marketing collateral? So that's another issue I think that we could look at. And then I think on the water, when we're delivering our sessions, you know, I could choose to wear a waist belt PFD, for example, but I don't. I use a vest, and I use a vest because it's more visible. So people, when they see me on the water, see me wearing that, rather than see me going around just in a rash vest and maybe don't quite realize that I'm wearing a PFD. I also wear a waist belt leash release. Why can't I say that?
It's a tongue twister, isn't it? That one?
A bit of a tongue twister. But I wear that not because it's a requirement, but again as a visibility thing. Because all of a sudden my clients are asking me, "Oh, what's that? Why is that different to what I have on my board?" Well, you know, this is an upgrade. You don't have to get it, but here's why you might think about it. And it starts that conversation. And I have seen one or two boards that recently were supplied with what I'm guessing is a waist belt leash release in it. But there was nothing in the board to say what it was. There was nothing in the package to say what it was. So I'm sure it would have probably just stayed in the bag if I hadn't told them, you know. So there's many different ways to promote it. And I think we need to start thinking a little bit, you know, bigger in terms of how that might happen.
Yeah, I definitely agree. So let's talk now a little bit about, obviously you've talked about the importance of SUP communities. And we've mentioned about how the sport is really, one of the things is the accessibility of paddleboarding. Yes, there is a skill behind it, but it is open to a lot of different people. You know, you can be old, you can be young, you can be male, you can be female, you can be fit, you can be unfit. There is a real, you know, kind of accessibility to it that draws people to the sport. So you mentioned earlier about the setting up a SUP community. So tell us a little bit about that.
So that's one of the things that drew me to SUP straight away. As soon as I kind of got involved, was all of a sudden these different people that started coming together, either asking what was this all about, or oh, I actually do that too. I didn't realize, you know, there was other people doing it. And slowly these communities started to come together. And they were very small to begin with, and it was nice because everyone was doing the same thing, and everyone was kind of learning at the same speed, and you know, learning from each other and things like that. And what was also wonderful was there was no elitism. It was all, you know, everyone was in it at the same place, and so then kind of from there, as I mentioned, I set up that WhatsApp thread initially, which was called Paddlers Anonymous. It just had that, it had that little name, and there's other ones that have come about since. And what's wonderful to see in them is the sharing of knowledge, and a lot of what I do revolves around that. You know, is I have this bank of knowledge that it's no point in it just sitting inside in here with me and me enjoying the knowledge. I might as well share it with other people. Sometimes I get paid for that, which is wonderful. And then sometimes I don't. And that's fine too, you know, because the last thing I would want to do is not have shared the knowledge and then find out that either someone didn't enjoy their session in a particular area as a result, or maybe found themselves in trouble as a result. You know, if I had the opportunity to share that knowledge, I would, you know. So that's kind of where the communities came from from my point of view. And what I love to see is, you know, when someone new is coming into the sport, introducing themselves within, like, there's a WhatsApp thread, there are various WhatsApp threads. There's a forum on Discord that I created called SUP Stoked, which has channels for every county around the country, and people can log on and, you know, get talking to each other about where do I paddle in Kerry, for example, or where do I paddle wherever. And also, you know, channels for events, buy and sell, all that kind of thing. And it's just wonderful to see new people come into those environments and be welcomed, and welcomed like they're welcomed when they hit the water. You know, it's just wonderful to see. I love the fact that SUP is a sport that doesn't have a huge ego about it. It's nice, you know, everyone is accepting of everyone, as he said. And as well as that, it does, you know, it's a sport for all colors, for all sizes, for all shapes, for all speeds, for all abilities. You know, I work on the phrase that if you've got the courage, I'll find your ability, you know, and that's all it takes. You know, you come down to the water with me, and if you have the courage to get on the water, we'll find out what we can do with you on a board, you know. And I like that, because I do say, like, it is called stand-up paddleboarding, but you don't have to stand. You know, if you want to kneel, that's okay. If you want to sit or prone paddle, that's okay. Maybe stand for a couple of minutes, kneel, stand, whatever you want to do. I had one lady out last weekend, slightly older in generations, and she had limited flexibility. So we got her out on the board, very comfortable knee paddling. She wanted to stand up, so she did, and she did without falling. So fair play to her, that was brilliant. And then very quickly went back down to her knees again. And I said to her, would you like to, you know, a little while down the session, I said, would you like to stand up again? And she said, no, I'm done now. I think I'll stay on my knees from now. And it wasn't a fear of standing up. It was just, she had done that, and now she was happy. You know, now she wanted to stay on her knees because she had found the place on the board that made her feel most comfortable, you know. So, you know, that's when it comes back to that idea of ability and accessibility. There is a place for everyone on a board.
Yeah, there absolutely is. And I've probably got similar stories I could share. I mean, one thing we love about because we run a SUP club, is just the vibe with that. And people aren't just coming, I think, to paddle. they're coming to be outdoors. They're coming to talk to people with a similar interest, and it's such a special thing. And I can have had a really bad day, you know, things haven't gone right, whatever. You're stuck in traffic. I get to the club, and within 10 minutes, I feel fine. You know, I'm outside. When I get on the water, people are saying hi, Chris, and stuff like that, and it does really have that. It's almost like a little tribe, I kind of think. Yeah. You know, paddleboarders, we're part of this sort of little group, and it is absolutely wonderful. It's a really, really special thing. It's a magical thing, really. I mean, part of obviously what we're saying, the communities, and one of the other topics we're going to talk about is mental health. So the therapy of water and blue space and things like that. So what are your opinions there? I mean, are you doing any work based around that, or is it just an interest? Where does that lie with you, sort of mental health and paddling?
Well, this is where I become very honest, and I have absolutely no problem talking about this in a public space. I became severely ill a few years ago, 2019, with my mental health. I suffered a very severe mental breakdown, developed an eating disorder, developed severe depression, severe anxiety, OCD, a number of different things. And I had found obviously water prior to that, but had to take a break from it. Had to take a time away from kitesurfing, SUP, all that. I ended up in treatment for a long time, and still to this day that continues. But slowly, about a year and a half after all of that happened, I managed to get out on a board again. I've been looking at the water for so long out my back window and going, oh, I really want to be back out there. I really do. But there was just this absolute block of being able to get back out on a board. And my partner, Carolina, suggested one evening, just look, why don't we just go down? We'll blow up the board. We'll put it out on the water. We'll just stand in the shallows. That's all we'll do. And it needed to be these kind of baby steps, you know. We'll just put it into the water and we'll just see what happens. Let's just see what happens. And all we did was we went down, got into the water, and lo and behold, we found that this was on a 10-6 board, right? 2 full adults kneeling on the board. Now the board, you know, it wasn't particularly stable given the size of it, but we just knee paddled for about 100 meters. And there's a picture I have, and I can send it to you, of that moment and the elation on my face in that moment of just being back up on the board and in that rhythm of the water was just phenomenal, you know. So I discovered how the water can bring you back, you know, how it can help you to find parts of you maybe you had lost, or parts of you that you were, you know, relearning, or things like that. I've found a confidence when I'm out in the water. You know, you mentioned there about if you've had a bad day or a long day and you get out on the water and you just enter this different headspace. I find that too, that, you know, there is obviously a lot of admin around running a SUP school, and there's, you know, a lot of, you know, business stuff that you have to deal with. But where I'm at my happiest in all of this is when I'm out on the water and I'm engaged with someone, or I'm engaged with a group, and we're just chatting, and I'm sharing the knowledge with them. So the confidence building, the mental cleansing that gives me is fantastic. But there's also another side to it, which is very much the side around if you're out on your own or you're out with a group. But it's when you're present in that moment with the water, and because I don't know if you find this, but generally the first 15 to 20 minutes of a session, you know, you're finding your own rhythm on the water. Maybe the swell is coming in a particular way that day, or the wind is coming in a particular way, or maybe the water temperature is a particular thing, or whatever it might be. So it takes a while to find that rhythm, and there is a rhythm to the water. We, you know, surfers know this for years. You know, sets come in particular ways. And we find that when we're out on the board. And so it's that moment where you find that rhythm, and you know, okay, now I can see it, now I can feel it, now I'm up on the board, now my muscle memory is kicked in. You know, I'm not having to focus on every little bump that's coming through. It's just happening. It's just moving. And that's that blue mind. And when that blue mind kicks in, it was Wallace J. Nichols that talks about it, you know. And when that blue mind kicks in, it's the most wonderful feeling. It really, really is. So for me, that's where a lot of that mental health and that mental well-being comes from. You know, it's not going to be a cure to my mental illness. You know, that I know that, but it is a tool I have in my toolbox to help me find good days against the bad days. you know, and I would hope that it does that for other people too. I haven't entered that space commercially yet in terms of, offering, water and therapy type sessions or anything like that. I would love to in the future, because I see it as an absolute, no-brainer. But for me right now, I think that just happens naturally in the sessions that I do, naturally, just through the crack that I have with people on the water. We end up just having natural therapy, maybe, if you want to call it that.
Thank you for sharing that story, first of all, about your own personal journey with mental health. And more so now, people are, I think mental health is really coming to the forefront. In my prior job in a school, I was responsible for a lot of that. And there were so many children that were suffering. And quite often they didn't know why. They'd come to my office and go, I don't know why I feel like this. And being able to offer things like green spaces, blue spaces, really does help. It really, I mean, for me, just taking a dog for a walk, going through some fields or a forest, like you say, getting out on the water. For me, the noise is the chattering of the board, when a board is gliding.
Yeah,
and you hear that,
yeah.
That's the sound for me. When I hear that I got that from surfing originally. That's I'm like, that's where that my blue mind's kicked in. And you get it off a paddleboard, don't you? When you're paddling along quick enough, you get that whole. So it is a really huge thing, and it's good to see that it's helped yourself, and that naturally it is helping other people when they are out in the water and paddling as well. So okay, the last thing we're going to talk about then today is how we sort of push paddleboarding as a sport, so potentially the racing side of it. Probably the biggest area is recreational paddling. A lot of people do it as a kind of a hobby, but I'd like to hear your sort of opinions on where you think the direction of paddleboarding is going as a sport, because there is something there are races, there are standings and stuff like that, but it'd be interesting to hear what your views are on that, Eoin.
Yeah, so I fully believe that SUP is a sport. I think maybe some people nowadays, again, going back to that idea of the accessibility of it and the ability to go into your local shop and buy a board, has maybe diluted that a little bit in terms of its standing as a sport. But just because it's a sport doesn't mean you can't take part. So that for me is the message that I think we need to drive forward. Is this is a sport, you are engaged in a sport, but that's not making it elitist in any way. It's just you start somewhere and you work your way up to the level you want to. So there is, recreational paddling as a hobby and a pastime, but still a sport. It's like going down to the local tennis club and playing your Sunday morning tennis or whatever it might be. And then you can decide how far you want to go with it after that. Do you want to go down the route of starting to do a bit of touring, so longer distances, further from your starting point? Or do you want to go down the road of, say, SUP racing, for example, which is on the rise again, and lovely to see. I think it is very important within that we do deliver a message that, SUP racing that's happening is very much for all, racing for all, rather than just racing for a certain number of people who have race boards, because, not everyone has a race board yet. Some people may never have a race board, but might want to just try their hand at, a 100-meter sprint or whatever it might be. So I think it's very important to be delivering that message across as well. And then you can go down the other roads of, SUP yoga and things like that. Or I'm really keen to start introducing SUP ball to Ireland. I really want to, particularly where I teach from, in the harbour that I teach from, there is a ready-made pitch. It's the exact dimensions. It is nice and sheltered. There's no boat movement throughout it. It's just ideal, and I'd love to get it. And it's actually right beside a very active pier where people walk up and down. So I'm really keen to get it going there as a visibility thing. Purely for a bit of fun. There wouldn't be a league, or there wouldn't be any sort of a championship or anything like that. It'd just be a bit like your Wednesday evening five-a-side. How many people turn up on a Wednesday evening? We might get two full teams, or we mightn't, and we'll see how we get on. But all those people walking up and down the pier will see this thing going on in the harbour, going, what the hell is this, And luckily enough, the harbour master in that particular harbour is really keen for that kind of thing. He loves to see this activity in the harbour. So I'm keen to, maybe look at how could we introduce that. it's also an ideal harbour for a bit of SUP racing, and so that might happen down the line, but we'll see. And then after that, you know, again, the idea of a sport, but a sport for all. So, you know, I really admire what the likes of What's Up in the UK are doing with their wheelchair accessible board. You know, which is they've built a board from the ground up with a specific chair. You know, and I really admire like the sponsons that come out from the side of it to give it the extra bit of flotation. I really admire that, and I again would love to bring that to Ireland. I'd love to bring that to Dublin, and just from a visibility point of view, you know, just show people that this is not, SUPs are not just overinflated lilos. You know, they are more than that, and there is more to them than that. You know, SUPs at the end of the day, you know, iSUPs or hardboards, you know, they're technical pieces of kit, and you know that the mid-range to high-range boards have a lot of design process gone into them, you know, and a lot of thinking gone into them, and there's reasons why they're different lengths and different sizes and all that kind of thing. So it's not like, it isn't just, you know, walking into your local beach hut and buying a see-through lilo that's going to last you one session and then deflate. There's more to it than that, you know.
Yeah, I mean, often people, not so much now because they're aware of what an inflatable board is, but you know, quite a while ago, people wouldn't realise that they were on an inflatable board. We'd be teaching a lesson, and halfway through they'd go, "Is that inflatable?" I'm like, "Yeah, it is." Now, wow, I'd never tell, and that was quite an interesting one, that people just didn't actually know the difference because they were the right PSI, and they thought there was a sort of a rubber deck pad or something on it. So that's quite an interesting one. Just picking up as well on we used to do SUP polo a lot in the winter in the pools, and it's the same sort of format. It was fun, it was visual, and it gave people a lot of confidence on the water, because they were in swimming pools. It was in the winter, which is fine, but you obviously were falling off all the time. The swimming pool wasn't massive, so there wasn't much scope to move, so you're having to do your pivot turns, and really, so anybody who really lacked confidence in wanting to fall off the board and stuff used to go, "Well, come and do a polo session with us," and they'd absolutely, and it was really good. It was full on. We do, I think, from memory, three minutes each side, maybe, or maybe even could have been that. And by the end of the 6 minutes, people were just absolutely knackered. You know, then we get another team on. So there's those sorts of things really do add to the sport. And I'm the same as you. I believe when people ask me what paddleboarding is, I always say it is a sport, and it is a sport. It's not a hobby. It's not anything else. That's exactly what it is. And in fact, racing was one of the things that also put us slightly more on the map, because we did the first ever race in the Midlands, and it was small, it was tiny, it was people who'd never really raced before, but it just kick-started that process. And the other point that you made about it should be accessible for everybody. Racing shouldn't just be about, you know, the guys who've got the 14-foot boards and are really into it. Yes, absolutely, there's that section of it, but we've also got to recognise that there might be people that just want to give it a go, you know, and it might be an all-round category, or it might just be a shorter distance, or whatever it is, or like you say, 100-meter sprint, but just giving it a go to get an idea of what it's like, a different side of the sport. So yeah, I definitely like the things.
I think what we should, what all of us as schools or ambassadors, in whatever form we're involved in the sport, I think where we need to be going is helping those people who maybe in the last year or two have invested in a board, be it an accessible board, be it a mid-range board, be it a more expensive board, through lockdown or through all of our COVID stuff, have invested in a board, did a bit of paddling on it, did a little bit of local stuff maybe on their beach, their river, their lake, whatever, and now it's starting to sit a little bit more often in the garage, not doing much, because they've only gotten to a certain place with it and said, God, that was a bit boring. You know, I don't get anything from it anymore, you know, because all they were doing was just a little bit of simple paddling. Now it's time to introduce them to what are the other things they can do. You know, even paddling with your dog, paddling with your kids, you know, all those little things, you know, are things I think we can start to branch out into and become more visible with. Because as soon as we become more visible with them, that board that's sitting in that garage becomes more valuable to its owner.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one of the things I may have mentioned to you before, is we're really keen to get an ASI race series going, getting all the school owners to kind of set up their races, and we have a bit of a format with the view of its accessibility, you know, keeping really, really simple formats, having the safety side, and then boom, off you go, kind of you know, everything's there and you can kind of do it. So that's hopefully one that I've sort of put out there a couple of times, and it's been met with a bit of lukewarm, but it'd be nice if we could push that. So I might be chasing you up to say, come on, Owen, let's run some races.
No problem. For sure. No, I think where I operate from has a lot of benefits for things like that. And I've recently made a very good connection with one of the local, it's local, but it's still quite big, yacht clubs. And so that's now where I operate from as a primary base. And this year we're keeping it, you know, relatively simple this year in terms of the operation, because they're getting used to having SUP involved in, you know, what is essentially a sailing club, and you know, what's this new sport that's kind of all of a sudden appeared. So we're working with them on that, but hopefully then, all going well, next year we might be able to start expanding into things like that with them, because I think there is a huge opportunity when you connect with a big water sports center, existing water sports center like that. It will give a huge amount of credibility to SUP, and to what SUP is, you know. So yeah, let's chat about it. You know, I'm open to everything.
Yeah, fingers crossed. All right. So lastly, then, the last question I was asked people is, so what lies in the future for you then? Where do you see yourself kind of headed? What would you like to be doing? I'm guessing it's probably still paddleboarding, of course. But yeah, where do you see yourself then, Owen, in the future?
Well, I'm glad you haven't used the cliche phrase in 5 years' time, because I really couldn't tell you.
Oh, never.
Yeah. I don't know, Chris, is the honest answer. And the reason I say that is this development of Discover SUP and my journey back into SUP, let's say, after having a break for a year or two, has been very much because of my passion for it, and my passion for the water. SUP is the tool that gets me onto the water, and then also SUP is something that I enjoy. But up until now, and for the continuing near future, it will continue to just be treated as a passion, and treated as something that allows me to share my knowledge, share enjoyable times, and get a little bit of money on the side for it. You know, how that develops down the line, then we'll wait and see. I purposely don't set myself targets or set myself, you know, massive goals or anything like that, because I don't want to risk failure, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't want to risk, you know, having to turn around and say, oh well, I failed because that didn't work. So it's all a big experiment, and from experiments all you can ever have is positive and negative results, but you learn from them for the next time you try it. So that's what this is, a big experiment, and you know, however long the experiment will go on for, it'll go on for, and then we'll have results at the end of it.
Yeah, I think, and it's a fun experiment by the sounds of it. I think you're right. It's I look at it organically, you know. I look at what I do in an organic sense, that I think had I first got into the sport and gone, right, I'm going to buy 50 paddleboards, I'm going to rent this space, I'm going to do this, that and the other, I probably would have made no money, spent lots of money, and within 4 weeks completely folded. You know, I started off with 8 boards, I think it was. I got a grant for that, a little tiny setup, and 2 of us. And then, you know, we gradually built to where we are today. And it was definitely the best way to do it. There was no way I could have missed out all of those steps from day one to today. And like you say, I've learned so much throughout that process that I would never have picked up on. So it's definitely the best way forward, to kind of let things grow how they should, and when there's an opportunity, take it. So no, I will be excited to see how it all goes. Hopefully see a little bit of racing there. So that brings our podcast to an end. So as I said, I really, really appreciate you, Owen, taking your time today to talk to us. We'll be posting that up soon, so you'll be seeing it on social media. And if you guys do want to see what Owen's up to over in Ireland, the website is discoversup.ie. So head over to the website, you can check out what those guys are doing. So Owen, thank you for today. I'll keep you on the line just a little bit after, but we'll say goodbye to the listeners now. Yeah, thanks very much.
Thanks very much.